we needed to address the Israel-Iran issue and to put priority attention on the Middle East. I wanted a very clear message to come out from the whole of the G7. The political goal of the G7 is de-escalation. We have worked and we will continue to work and to be active to achieve de-escalation throughout the Middle East. And as far as I am concerned, from this evening, I've been in contact with the embassies of Italy in Tehran and the Italian embassy in Tel Aviv. And I just wanted to say for the Italian journalists that there are no problems for Italian nationals in Iran. We have approved 2 final documents, one of them concerning the situation in the Middle East, and the other concerning Ukraine. We have condemned the recent attack on the part of Iran against Israel. The G7 supports Israel's independence, but we invite all parties to work to avoid any escalation. And that's, I'm quoting our document, and the G7 will work towards that result. We've also written that we want to continue to work to stabilize the situation, avoid any escalation, and we ask all parties to make a positive contribution towards this collective effort. We ask Iran to cease its relations with Hamas and to stop supporting Hezbollah. And we have not excluded the possibility of adopting sanctions or other measures in response to recent events or in response to any destabilizing actions which may be taken. With regard to Gaza, we have reiterated our commitment towards an immediate and sustainable ceasefire in order to ensure the release of the hostages and also to ensure the provision of goods and food to the civil population, the Palestinian civil population. And in this connection, all the G7 recognized, and this is in the final document, the Italian project Food for Gaza. Everybody recognized this as a tool for peace in this difficult area. We have also repeated our opposition to an Israeli attack on Rafah, and we repeated that our goal is to have 2 states for 2 peoples. With regard to the Red Sea now, safety of shipping and the impacts on maritime routes is a priority for us, and the European Operation Aspides, working together with Prosperity Guardian, is working to protect merchant ships traveling in the area. We are following the development of the situation on a minute-by-minute, hour-by-hour basis with strong coordination between the G7 countries. With regard to Ukraine, you know that we invited Minister Kuleba, the foreign minister of Ukraine, with whom I had a bilateral meeting this morning, and we repeated the need for a just and lasting peace, which represents an absolute priority for the Italian presidency. I also spoke with Minister Crosetto this morning because we're looking to find the best ways to support Kiev, and we agreed on an urgent action, coordinated action on the part of global partners in connection with the Peace Summit in June. And we also want to renew our cooperation with Africa. We invited as an outside guest the foreign minister of Mauritania to be part of our meeting. This is the country which is currently chairing the African Union. We gave a central role to Sahel on the G7 agenda. As you know, this is one of Italy's priorities. We have our Mattei plan, and this is something which we discussed during our meeting and something which was appreciated by our African friends. And here, too, we intend, the G7 intends to play an important part. I would say that this G7 meeting was very political in nature. We reiterated the existence of a strategy on the part of Western countries and the most industrialized countries, which recognize themselves in defending values of democracy, central role of the person, the rule of law, democracy. This demonstrates that our unity is founded on values. It's not just a unity of interests, but it is a political unity and a coalition which has a strategic vision with regard to everything happening in the world. With regard to Africa, I stressed that there has to be an international structural approach to the basic reasons behind migration. In the part of the release concerning illegal migration, I included the consideration that this is something which has to be regulated on the basis of national interests, using national sovereign regulations. Another topic which we addressed this morning after having discussed the situation in the Middle East was the Indo-Pacific region. We have acted for stability, political balance, and world trade. We want to maintain international stability and advance our interests, repeating that China is an essential interlocutor in order to deal with global scenarios and crisis situations. We also discussed disinformation. As I stated yesterday, I signed an MOU with Secretary of State Blinken, so Italy and the United States will commit themselves to defend, I think this is in the interest of all journalists, freedom of information. It's a battle for democracy, and soon elections will be held in the European Union, in the United States. There are elections in many parts of the world, and we do not want our democracy to be tainted by the dissemination of false information using all kinds of instruments, including artificial intelligence. From this point of view, there will be an ongoing commitment to ensure that there be an exchange of information. We've already begun today because cyber attacks need to be stemmed. These actions have started with Russia. We remember that in the case of the attack some time ago in Moscow, there was an attempt to paint this as an organization backed by Kiev, whereas this was an organization of individuals from backed by Afghanistan. And we decided to establish a working group to address the situation in Haiti. This is something which is of importance, of much importance to our crisis unit, which has worked to relieve a number of Italian nationals in that country. And I wish to repeat that, frankly, this was a great success. I was thanked by all our guests who felt at home in this wonderful scenario of Capri, one of the most beautiful places in Italy, and I would say one of the most beautiful places in the world. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank all those who took part in the organization of the G7, including our guests, with regard to the political aspects. And I also want to thank all the law enforcement personnel who have assured the security of this important meeting. I want to thank the firefighting services. I want to thank the municipality of Capri for having hosted us, and the whole of the population of this wonderful island who greeted our guests with open arms, making them feel they were at home. 300 delegates, more than 300 journalists, photographers, and other news personnel. With this meeting, Italy confirmed its role as a major protagonist on the world stage, and it has shown itself to be an important entity in the Mediterranean. And it is once again, it's a crossroads for a global balance, global equilibrium. And finally, I want to express my pride as an Italian, a pride to be Italian. I'm very proud of all the work which has been carried out, and I'm also very proud that Italy has beauties like the island of Capri. And I'd like to thank you all for the service you're providing in a very complex period where it's very important to have accurate information. Base Edizione Sirio answer. First question. The microphone is coming. Good morning, Mr. Minister. Some observers and commentators this morning, after what happened in Iran last night, thinking that this could freeze that scenario, that front. What does this mean for the other two hot fronts in the Middle East, Gaza and the border between Lebanon and Israel? Well, we've said that we are acting for de-escalation. When we say de-escalation, we want this part of the conflict between Iran and Israel to come to an end. We want to be optimistic. And, as I said, the G7 will not be a spectator in our text. It's clearly expressed that the G7 has worked, will work, and is working and will working to achieve a de-escalation. We'll do everything within our powers to ensure that the goals we've set ourselves can be attained in the short, medium, and long term. De-escalation, ceasefire, release of the hostages, aid to the Palestinian civilian population in order to achieve the goal of two states, two peoples, two states. So we've not just taken a photograph of the situation, we've undertaken a collective political comment, and that's why I said it's a very positive meeting where the G7 committed itself to a political role to bring peace to the Middle East in line with our principles of course, and the defense of our values. And therefore, I believe that we can look optimistically, not optimistically perhaps, but we will do everything we can in order to make this document a fact. We've obviously condemned the attack against Israel from Iran, the first time this has happened, and we invited all parties to commit themselves to de-escalation. I believe that the message, which is this message issuing from so many countries, can be taken on board by the various parties involved. Rai News. Good morning. I'd like to thank you. Whether during the working session the United States provided any information on how and whether Israel had provided prior notice of these attacks. I think you know this. The United States were informed at the last minute, but there was no involvement on the part of the United States. It was simply information which was provided. But I believe that what has happened is also the small scale of the event is the result also of the efforts of the G7. With regard to the Italians, because there's a small group of Italians living in the city which was targeted by drones, and none of them have any problems, and they're saying life has resumed normally. The Iranian airspace has been reopened, and therefore I believe that the atmosphere is better than it was last night. And the work of the G7, I think, also serves to improve the atmosphere. I want to be optimistic. It'd be bad to not be. La Stampa newspaper. Good morning, Minister. With regard to the Ukrainian air defense, Kuleba, Zelensky, and yesterday Stoltenberg talked not just about Patriots, but some Ps, which Italy has. Yesterday, Prime Minister Meloni said, I've asked Minister Crosetto to do everything possible because the civilian infrastructures of Ukraine are being destroyed, and we have to do anything possible. And you've talked to Minister Crosetto. If you've taken some decisions, because up to some time ago we could say we have no Patriots, but now they're asking a system which is available to Italy. I can only confirm what the Prime Minister said, also in light of my discussion this morning with Minister Crosetto, which took place in the presence of Minister Kuleba. I repeat, we will do everything possible in order to help Ukraine, also from the point of view of air protection. Reuters. Good afternoon, Minister. On another topic, I'd like to put you a question. With regard to frozen Russian assets, in the release, it says that the leaders will need to find the final solution. But based on your conversations currently, which in your point of view could be the follow-up to this, how can we solve this problem? The problem's very clear with regard to interest. The interest, there is a legal basis which can be made use of. We have to see where there's a legal basis to make use of the principle of the frozen assets. We believe that law has to be complied with when we want to comply with the law. So based on the assessments made, the leaders will then decide on what to do. With regard to possible sanctions against Iran, Every entity decides on the basis of different rules. The European Union countries decide together. On Monday, there'll be a meeting of EU foreign ministers. In our text, you see we mention sanctions or other measures. Our meeting was a political meeting, not a technical meeting, and we'll see how the various countries, based on the differing rules there are, we Italians, French, Germans, we can't take national decisions on the sanctions. The decisions are taken at a community level. United States, Japan, Canada, the United States can decide independently. We have to take decisions inside the European Union. The various possibilities, I will assess what are the most effective are.
Sky News Arabia. Good afternoon. American Secretary of State Blinken truly shared with you what was happening in Isfahan this morning. And as far as Lebanon is concerned, it seems to be a hotspot. What is the reaction of the European Union? Thank you. Of course, we all shared information that was coming in, that was at hand. Because, as we said, the relationship amongst our countries consolidated. And this was one of the targets of the Italian presidency, to have an authoritative G7. So in order to be authoritative and make decisions, you need to exchange information that was had by each country. Well, from very early in the morning, I started calling our embassies, for example, in Tel Aviv and Tehran, which obviously had been working through the night to get information on the situation. And, of course, they all offered information, and we shared them amongst the G7 countries. As far as Lebanon is concerned, the situation is crucial. We Italians are particularly sensitive to this because, as you know, there are 2 Italian missions in Lebanon. One which is part of UNIFIL, and we have more than 1,100 men and women which serve as a buffer between Israel and Hezbollah. And I'd like to thank those military people because they play their role effectively, are mediators and have excellent relations on both sides. And they will continue being stationed there for their military role. As Minister Crosetto, Minister for Defense, has always said at the UN, they also play, of course, a political role, but there's a second military mission. It is bilateral. It's based in the Beirut port, at the Beirut port, and this is involved in training the Lebanese army, which is an important goal, having a military entity which is not Hezbollah. So I believe our presence in that country is important. The stability of Lebanon is fundamental. It is a country which has refugees, which is living in a difficult situation financially, economically, and it is no accident that I went there twice. And a few weeks ago, our Prime Minister went there as well. So we Italians, but all of us, are underlining the need to have stability in that country, and we all hope that we will finally have the border as we had for the maritime border, the land border, so that there is a clear situation, which may be an additional element to decrease tension. And we hope that no missiles are launched from Lebanon by Hezbollah against Israel. In the document, we also refer to Hezbollah because we ask Iran not to supply weapons to this political military organization which is attacking Israel. GR Rai. My first love. Minister, this interplay of action, counteraction, don't you think this might initiate a new escalation, a slow-burning escalation? How can we try and switch the fire off? We are doing this. The text of the final document we approved, as I said and I read, is very, very clear. We are committed, and we will commit towards escalation. So a political and diplomatic role, an active role, will be played by all G7 countries, which will work in favor of de-escalation in the area of the Middle East. So there is a political commitment standing. There hasn't been a technical G7. We haven't had a G7 in which we merely examined the international situation. This was a G7 in which we reiterated cohesion among all the countries belonging to the organization. And above all, we have committed to acting together, strengthening cooperation, as I said, on a daily basis, not just the political and strategic cooperation, but cooperation on a daily basis to exchange information and decide over shared or common actions. We will do our utmost so that our political line, I'm not saying we hope to, but we will do everything possible so that this becomes actions. Agencia Nova. Hello, Minister. I would like to move away geographically, and I'd like to go to the Indo-Pacific, where there are strong tensions, and Italy has launched some messages in terms of its commitment, and President Meloni announced some joint exercises, military exercises with Japan. So from this G7, do we have some sign of deterrence towards China? We would like to have a situation of peace, free circulation of goods, and the presence of our military navy pursues this aim. We'd like to give a sign towards the free circulation of goods. We work to defend the status quo in the Indo-Pacific area. And we hope that a de-escalation will take place there too. We are committed to being present, also through a positive relationship with India, which is a very important country for us, and having a continuing dialogue with China, of course. Last week, a strategic cooperation meeting was had, which was a cooperation agreement that was launched in 2004, and we asked them to cooperate in terms of safeguarding maritime shipping in the Suez and Red Sea area, and because some Chinese ships were attacked as well. And in this perspective, active involvement was announced on the part of China, and I hope that this will be the prerequisite for further positive developments. The President of the Republic will go to visit China. China is our competitor, but a competitor with which we would like to share good relations to guarantee peace. So we will continue to cultivate relations with Australia, Philippines, New Zealand, and Japan. As you know, there is a defense industry agreement to build a military craft between Italy, Japan, and the UK. So I believe that relations with Japan have a pivotal role to play. I spoke over dinner about this with the Foreign Affairs Minister of Japan. And once again, we would like to further strengthen our relations with this country to guarantee stability in the Indo-Pacific area. In the document, you will find that we reiterate concerns about what North Korea is doing, and we ask China, the document is a reference, not to supply double-use material to the Russian Federation. This is a clear message. It is not weapons, but it is dual-use material. And once again, this is a very clear and evident message because China can do much to stop the war of Russia against Ukraine. So time is running out. There's only two questions left. Bloomberg. Hello, Minister. Please, can you help us understand what happened specifically this morning? Iran was attacked by drones. Against what type of installation? And there's something else I'd like to ask you. We have read there are different versions of diplomatic action to actually affect the situation. What did Italy suggest, or what was its line? Because apparently you were successful. Well, we based ourselves on common sense. From the very day I was the first minister to get to the places where the 7th of October tragedy had taken place. From the very beginning, as the Minister of Foreign Affairs of a friendly country, I asked Israel to have and to wage a proportionate reaction to the attack suffered. But over the last months, we always expressed words of closeness to Israel, but we also asked Israel to be cautious. We spoke of what's been happening in Palestine, and of course we are amongst the countries calling for ceasefire. It is no accident that we call for no attack to be made against Rafah. And in Rome, when the Minister Katz of Israel came to we actually supported the Food for Gaza project, and we also asked that a representative of Israel to be involved in this project, so that Israel knows that this food aid may reach the area in cooperation with FAO, Red Crescent, Red Cross, and all our civil organizations, so that those goods may actually get to the people who need them rather than in the hands of Hamas. So once again, through the new entry points in the north of Gaza, this may take place. So as friends of the country, we absolutely defend the security of Israel. We have reiterated this, but we do call for de-escalation. So as the G7, when friendly countries launch a message, considerations must then follow on the part of Israel. Hopefully it is a positive consideration. Our document is clear. We are friends. We condemn the attack suffered by Israel, but also a call for de-escalation on both sides. Last, Master Sabene, TG2. Hello, Minister. You spoke of the message of the political role held by the G7. I ask myself, couldn't the G7 be an interlocutor to help sit Iran, how absurd may it be, Iran and Israel sit around a table, a negotiation table? Do you think this is impossible as a scenario? Number one, what about de-escalation? Well, it is unlikely for Israel and Iran to sit around the same table in the near future. But what matters today, as I say, is de-escalation. So this phase to be closed, and we can live and start and open a different season, a different period, by solving the problem in Gaza, by reducing aggressiveness both on the part of Houthis and Hezbollah, as we know, are supplied by Iran. And when we speak of common sense and initiatives towards de-escalation, we are referring to Iran, and we're asking Iran to work towards de-escalation. Otherwise, it looks like the responsibility is that of Israel. It is Iran who first attacked massively Israel. Not all G7 countries have a diplomatic relationship with Iran. We do, and we will convey messages, as I did. Because hours before the attack, I talked with the Iranian Minister of Foreign Affairs, and once again, the message was clear, a reiteration of our political stance and our preference for de-escalation. Even when you don't share opinions, diplomatic efforts must continue if the aim is peace without giving ground. But dialogue does not mean giving up on our positions, but it means that we may try and convince the interlocutor who may have a different opinion to undertake less violent attitudes. And in our opinion, all the countries of the G7 wish to arrive towards a de-escalation, which must open a new season of peace. Thank you. Thank you.
security pacts. And together with what I'm convinced will emerge from the NATO summit, you can see Ukraine effectively building a force for the future, one that can deter aggression and defeat it as necessary. We're working to drive private sector investment into Ukraine and also help it develop its own defense industrial base in ways that will provide for a strong, enduring economy. And of course, now that the accession path to the EU is open, that will help Ukraine deep-root its democracy. But even as we're doing all of that, we heard clearly from Foreign Minister Kuleba that it's imperative that in this moment, Ukraine get more resources that it needs to deal with the ongoing Russian aggression. It needs more air defenses. It needs more munitions. It needs more artillery. Allies and partners, including the G7 countries, are committed to delivering on that. We discussed steps to provide more assistance more immediately to Ukraine. We also discussed ways to protect and help restore its energy grid, which Russia sought to decimate. And I think we can see taken, but more to come in making sure that Ukraine has sustainable energy for its people. We're also working to strengthen efforts to disrupt the transfer of weapons and also inputs for Russia's defense industrial base. When it comes to weapons, what we've seen, of course, is North Korea and Iran primarily providing things to Russia. But when it comes to Russia's defense industrial base, the primary contributor in this moment to that is China. We see China sharing machine tools, semiconductors, other dual-use items that have helped Russia rebuild the defense industrial base that sanctions and export controls had done so much to degrade. Now, if China purports, on the one hand, to want good relations with Europe and other countries, it can't, on the other hand, be fueling what is the biggest threat to European security since the end of the Cold War. And you don't have to just take that from me. This is what I heard around the table at the G7. Progress on solutions also to use Russia's sovereign assets for Ukraine was on the agenda. And here, I think we're working on getting to an agreement on that, consistent with international law, consistent with different countries' laws. The Kremlin has called this theft. The real theft is in Ukrainians' lives taken, in so much of Ukraine's infrastructure destroyed, in so much of its land seized. Being able to use these Russian sovereign assets to help rebuild Ukraine is critical, and it's also something that one way or another, one day or another, is going to happen. It's also a complement to, but not a substitute for, the assistance that we all need to be providing in the moment to Ukraine, and in particular, the supplementary budget request that President Biden has made and that it appears will be before the House this weekend. And again, I just want to emphasize two things. First, this money and everything it'll provide is urgently needed by Ukraine, by its people who are so bravely defending their country and defending their democracy. Second, as I said, we have European and other partners, including in Asia, who are doing so much themselves to help provide for Ukraine. And finally, virtually all of the supplemental will be invested in the United States, in defense production, in our own defense industrial base, and that means good jobs in the United States. Finally, we focused intensely over these last couple of days on reaching out to new partners, and this includes in the Indo-Pacific, where we're working to promote a free and open Indo-Pacific. Here, I think it's very instructive that the support that Russia's received from China, from North Korea, from Iran, demonstrates that security in Europe, security in Asia, and other parts of the world are indivisible. They're deeply connected. And this is something, again, that we heard around the table over these last couple of days. The G7 is united on the need for peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, the South China Sea, the Korean Peninsula, and also united in standing up to China's unfair and non-market practices, especially when it comes to overcapacity, that is, flooding the markets of our own countries with new products and technologies that are heavily subsidized and so underpriced, driving our own businesses out of the market and seeking to dominate these markets themselves. Again, this is a very clear common concern among all of our countries. Finally, the other piece of this is that the G7 continues to work to deepen engagement with global partners to help deliver results everywhere. We had the chair of the African Union with us yesterday for very good conversations. And what we're really looking at is working in practical ways with countries in Africa and beyond to make clear, tangible, deliverable improvements in the lives of their people, and as a result, the lives of our own people. We have the AU that's now a member of the G20. We're particularly focused on how Africa can play its rightful role in meeting both regional and global challenges. There's growing collaboration on infrastructure and technology to improve connectivity, build resilience. We reaffirmed our commitment to sustainable development and especially to the Sustainable Development Goals. Also to reforming the international financial institutions, multilateral development banks.
Assessments support for Russia for its war effort in Ukraine. Do you believe that President Xi is sensing an opportunity amid flagging U.S. support to the Ukrainians? Thank you, sir.
Great. Thanks, Livia. On the first question, the reports that you've seen, I'm not going to speak to that, except to say that the United States has not been involved in any offensive. What the G7 is focused on, and again, it's reflected in our statement and in our conversation, is our work to de-escalate tensions, to de-escalate from any potential conflict. You saw Israel on the receiving end of an unprecedented attack, but our focus on, of course, making sure that Israel can effectively defend itself, but also de-escalating tensions, conflict, and that remains our focus. Again, I'm not going to speak to anything other than to say we were not involved in any offensive operations. With regard to the other questions, first, on China and Russia. Look, I think that what we're seeing is a product of the relationship between countries. Speak to it, including just before Russia's aggression against Ukraine. We've made very clear to China, and many other countries have as well, that they should not be supplying Russia with weapons for use in its aggression against Ukraine. We've not seen the direct supply of weapons, but as I said, what we have seen is not only the direct supply, but the critical supply of inputs, of components for Russia's defense industrial base, which is allowing two things. It's allowing Russia to continue the aggression against Ukraine. It's also helping Russia overall rebuild its defense forces and defense capacity that so much damage has been done to by the Ukrainians, but also by our sanctions and export controls. And that means that not only is Russia a current threat to Ukraine, it will remain an enduring threat to other European countries. And that's why I said China can't have it both ways. It can't purport to want to have positive, friendly relations with countries in Europe and at the same time be fueling the biggest threat to European security since the end of the Cold War. That was very clear from our conversations around the table. I believe Europeans have expressed that and will continue to express that clearly to China in the days and weeks ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. So on that, I think you're referring to the so-called Leahy law and our work under that. So this is a very important law, and it's one that we apply across the board. And when we're doing these investigations, these inquiries, it's something that takes time, that has to be done very carefully, both in collecting the facts and analyzing them. And that's exactly what we've done. And I think it's fair to say that you'll see results very soon. I've made determinations. You can expect to see them in the days ahead.
For the next question, Oliviero Bergamini with RAI TGI.
Good afternoon. Two quick questions. First, do you have the feeling that today's strike was limited so that Iran was not compelled to react? In that sense, are you optimistic about not a big war breaking out? And there is an Iran issue. Do you think that in the future, other countries like Italy that has historical ties with Iran could play a role in the de-escalation and stabilization that you mentioned?
Thank you. Well, two things. Again, I'm not going to speak to these reported events. All I can say is that for our part, and for the entire G7, our focus has been on de-escalation, on avoiding a larger conflict. And actually, that's been true since day one, after the horrific events of October 7th. A big part of our approach has been to prevent the conflict from spreading, to avoid escalation everywhere, and that's a common policy across the G7, and it's very much our approach now. So we've been engaged in efforts to avoid escalation. Those efforts will continue. Italy plays a critical role in this as a leading country, as a country that's engaged around the world with many other countries that have their own relationships with countries involved in the Middle East. Italy has its own direct engagements, and I think what we've seen over the past 10 days or so, a couple of weeks, is that those engagements have been and remain very important to keeping things calm, to avoiding escalation, to preventing a larger conflict. Italy is an important player in this.
Nadia Bilbassi with Al Arabiya.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I want to press you again on the Iran question. It seems that both the Iranian and the Israeli responses were measured and calculated. Would you say that now we averting a major confrontation and a possible war? And what messages would the U.S. played in sending to both sides for restraint? And are we back to the proxy war? And if you allow me on Rafah, the U.S. position is very clear. You oppose a military operation in Rafah as long as there's no plan to evacuate 1.5 million Palestinian civilians. The Israeli government is adamant to go ahead. What is your understanding of the plan now, and what is acceptable for the U.S.? And finally, on the UN Security Council, the United States looks isolated yesterday. Your allies, close allies, France, Japan, and South Korea, both voted for admitting Palestine as a member. The Israelis, including Netanyahu, on the record saying they oppose two-state solution. So what is the path forward, and what message do you give to Palestinians and to moderates in the region if you truly want to isolate extremists? Thank you.
Good. Thanks very much for the questions. Let me simply, first of all, repeat what our focus has been and what it remains. De-escalation, avoiding conflict, and so yes, calling on all concerned to exercise restraint. That's what we've been doing over the last couple of weeks, and as necessary, that's what we'll continue to do. And again, that's reflected in the statement that you'll see coming from all of the G7 countries. On Rafah, we have been very clear about this. President Biden's been very clear about this. we cannot support a major military operation in Rafah. First, there are currently somewhere around 1.4 million people in Rafah, many of them displaced from other parts of Gaza. In the first instance, it's imperative that people are able to get out of the way of any conflict. And doing that, getting people out of harm's way, is a monumental task for which we've yet to see a plan. And not only getting them out of harm's way, making sure that they can be supported with humanitarian assistance if they're out of harm's way. But second, even if people are largely out of harm's way, inevitably there's going to remain a pretty significant civilian population in Rafah. And we believe that a major military operation with a large presence of a civilian population would have terrible consequences for that population. We are committed, as Israel is, to ensuring that Gaza cannot be controlled by Hamas. We've seen the devastation and destruction that have resulted from Hamas's leadership and the actions that it's taken. And well before October 7th, what it was providing, or rather not providing, for the Palestinian people made clear that its concern had nothing to do with the Palestinian people and everything to do with its objectives to destroy Israel. So making sure that Hamas cannot repeat the events of October 7th, that's something that we're united in. But in terms of major military operations in Rafah, it's something that we don't support, and we believe that the objective can be achieved by other means. We've been engaged in conversations at senior levels with Israel over the past couple of weeks on this, including as recently as this week. Those conversations continue. Finally, on the UN Security Council resolution. First, we are committed, the United States is committed to achieving a Palestinian state. We believe that that is vital to having long-term, sustainable, durable peace and security. And of course, it's the only way to fulfill the aspirations, the rightful aspirations of the Palestinian people. But getting to that, achieving that state, has to be done through diplomacy, not through imposition. And the resolution that was voted at the Security Council will have no effect on actually moving things forward and achieving a Palestinian state. Again, that can only be accomplished by diplomatic means. It's also important to point this out. Under United States law, even if we had wanted to vote for this resolution, had we done so, under our law, it would have obligated us to cut off all of our funding to the United Nations. Clearly not in the interests of anyone, including the Palestinians, particularly given the contributions we make to programs that are vital to them. But as I said, we're committed to working to achieve a Palestinian state with the necessary guarantees for Israel's security. And we've been working on that, including as part of the potential normalization process between Israel and Saudi Arabia, something that we've intensely engaged on over the last several months and weeks. So you can see an important path forward that's there. And in fact, we saw it in the wake of the unprecedented Iranian attack on Israel. You can see for Israel a future where a coalition of countries are working together to deal with the Iranian threat and to isolate it, with Israel that's integrated into the region, with normal relations with its neighbors, and a resolution to the Palestinian question, which is necessary to really deep root and achieve that coalition. That's an incredibly powerful future. It answers what Israel has long sought, which is to have normal relations throughout the region. It deals with the single biggest threat to Israel's security, and for that matter, to the security of most countries in the region, and our own, which is Iran and its proxies. But to get there, it's going to require calm in Gaza, and it's going to require a clear pathway to a Palestinian state. So we see that as one of the best ways to actually achieve results. Again, you can put something down on a piece of paper and wave it around. It has no effect. What does and can have an effect is actual diplomacy, working to achieve these agreements, and then delivering concrete results. That's what we're focused on. Finally, I would say this. Also take a look at the G7 statement today, which shows unity on this question. It says that there's going to be a proper time, a rightful time for recognition. This is not that time. We need to do the diplomacy. We need to do the hard work to bring parties together, to bring the region together, and to demonstrate that there's a much better future that awaits everyone if they follow this path.
And for the final question, Jessica Parker with BBC.
Thank you, Jessica Parker, BBC News. If I can first ask, why won't you address events that have happened overnight? Isn't it important that you do so? Can you tell us if you've spoken to your Israeli counterparts? And I'm interested to know how you would characterize the US-Israel relationship right now. And if I can, on Ukraine as well, hopes are obviously rising. The US may pass this $60 billion aid package for Ukraine, but given the amount of time it's taken, given the situation in Ukraine, is it coming too late?
Good. So I'm going to be incredibly boring and not make your day by saying, again, I'm not going to speak to what's been reported, other than to say that the United States has not been involved in any offensive operations. The United States, along with our partners, will continue to work for de-escalation. On Ukraine, most important thing is getting this aid voted and moving it forward. And it will, I know, make a profound difference, and make a profound difference almost right away in making sure that Ukraine has what it needs to defend itself effectively against the ongoing Russian aggression. No. Is it too late? No. If it happens now, it's not too late. If it doesn't happen, or takes a lot more time, there is a real risk that, yes, it will be too late, and you've heard others speak to it, including the Secretary of Defense. Now, would it be better if that aid had been voted months ago? Absolutely. But in terms of meeting Ukraine's urgent needs, it's incredibly timely to get it done right away, this weekend. So I'm convinced, and all of our experts are convinced, that it can and will make a hugely important material difference in the success of Ukraine's defense and the success in repelling the Russian aggression. But if this continues to linger, yes, there is a real risk that we'll get to a point where it's simply too late. We are engaged on a regular, pretty much daily basis. And we're committed to helping Israel defend itself and, as necessary, participating in its defense, as you saw just a few days ago, and as you saw not only from us, but from a number of other countries. Again, Israel makes its own decisions, but we have a commitment to defending it. And you saw an unprecedented attack from Iran into Israel, and the United States and others working with Israel to make sure that that attack would not have devastating consequences, and thankfully it did not. But on all of these issues, whether it's relationship with Iran, whether it's the conflict in Gaza, whether it's Lebanon, you name it, we're in constant engagement with Israel, just as we're in constant engagement with allies and partners throughout the region and around the world. This is a collective effort to try to manage the conflict in the Middle East, to bring the conflict in Gaza to a close, to achieve a ceasefire and the release of hostages. And by the way, a number of other countries around the table today also have hostages in Gaza held by Hamas and other groups. And it's also important to remember, because I sometimes think that people have forgotten this. We have American hostages who've been held in the most deplorable conditions all of this time. So all of us are working on all of these issues, and what's so important and what's reflected in the G7 statement is we're doing it together. And my belief is that our collective influence, our collective diplomacy can make a real difference, first of all, in ending the conflict in Gaza, ensuring that Hamas can never repeat October 7th, getting that ceasefire, the release of hostages, a major expansion in humanitarian assistance, and then turning the corner for the people of Gaza so that we can help rebuild their lives their livelihoods. And, as I said, deal with the critical long-term issues to enduring peace and stability, including a Palestinian state. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good afternoon. I would like to warmly welcome you to the press conference of Foreign Minister Baerbock at the end of the 2 days meeting of the G7 foreign ministers. You now have the opportunity to ask questions regarding the different topics on the agenda of this meeting after the introductory remarks of the foreign minister. There will be time for 2 questions. Good afternoon. In these times, in these tense times in global politics, nothing is more important than to have close partners and friends at your side. What counts in these days is close harmonization and coordination and a maximum of trust, as is the case among the G7 states, among us democracies, leading economies, among us as friends and colleagues. This is why it is a particularly good thing that in these turbulent global times, we have had the opportunity to meet under the Italian presidency here in Capri. Last night, too, we have been closely liaising. And I would like to underline what my colleague, Secretary Blinken, said a minute ago. Against the backdrop of reports about the attacks on the 19th of April, we call upon all parties to work to ensure that there is no further escalation. As the G7, that is exactly what we're doing these days. In Berlin this morning, the government's crisis unit met under the guidance and leadership of the Foreign Office. The federal government continues to watch the situation on the ground. It's a fact that last weekend, Iran, in an unprecedented manner, escalated the situation and tried to take to the brink of chaos a region at large. This must have consequences. The moment has come for us as democracies and partners sharing the same values have to stand together. Coordination and cooperation makes our strength. We, the G7 countries, have decided today to impose further sanctions and measures on Iran. At the same time, this is the moment where we need to do whatever we can to ensure that the escalation does not spiral in a way that will have unforeseeable consequences for the whole region. I have been working for this objective, traveling the world for that very purpose. We, the G7 countries, again say and appeal that everyone has to act in a calm and responsible manner. Neither the people in Israel nor in Iran nor in third countries of the region want to be thrown into a catastrophe. The only thing they want is to be able to live in peace. Of course, we also used the opportunity yesterday and today to discuss in detail the overall situation in the Middle East. All those hostages still being kept by Hamas in dark cellars have to be released immediately and unconditionally. We will not allow, given the tense situation, that the eyes of the international community turn away from the people in Gaza. They lack everything: food, water, medicine, the basic things you need to be able to survive. Far too little of these goods and supplies reaches them, especially via the land route, especially the north of Gaza, especially the weakest, the children, that is. We, the G7, underline what my colleague David Cameron and I already made very clear when we visited Jerusalem on Tuesday. Despite the fact that visible first steps have been taken to get more humanitarian aid into Gaza, this has not been enough, and the Israeli government continues to be obliged to ensure that the humanitarian suffering of so many people, especially the children in Gaza, comes to an end. And it has the duty and the obligation to protect the civilian population, especially in Rafah, where more than 1 million people are still looking for shelter. A large-scale military operation would have catastrophic consequences here. For more than 6 months, we, the G7, We, the federal government, I as foreign minister, have been untiringly working, relentlessly working to ensure that the catastrophe that Hamas brought upon the people of the region will not be repeated, that the suffering has an end for all parties. And the decisive step on the path leading towards this objective is another humanitarian ceasefire, a pause in fighting and bombardment that leads to a sustainable ceasefire. Another massive conflict, a so-called hot war, which has been keeping us on our toes for more than 2 years, however, not winded and anything but inactive, and that is Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, has also been a central point on our agenda. Here again, it makes for the strength of the G7 that we act together with our global partners and our Ukrainian friends. And the Secretary General of NATO and Foreign Minister Kuleba from Ukraine joined us here yesterday to allow for that close coordination. Our friend Dmitry Kuleba reported how Putin tries relentlessly to bomb and destroy the electricity supply in Ukraine. Everything hinges on energy, as we all know only too well. The energy supply for water, hydrogen plant, fuel to fire, to heat and to cook in cities, in villages. It is of immense importance for the survival of the people. And Putin acts in a very determined fashion. He feeds into the fear of the people, and he cuts off the lifeline of the people here. To prevent worse things from happening, Ukraine urgently needs a better protective shield, a better protective umbrella, a better air defense, and it does so immediately. Germany makes a contribution towards this by supplying another Patriot system. The initiative global search that I began with my colleague, Defense Minister Pistorius, for further available air defense systems to help protect Ukraine was therefore also a central topic on our agenda here. Every Patriot battery, every SAMP-T system, every single system protects a city, protects one critical supply center more than so far. And that is what is of decisive importance now. Each and every individual system, each and every individual friend of Ukraine. The G7, as the closest partners of Ukraine, are also joining their forces. We are joining our forces. Together, we are trying to see how we can get as many such systems together. We want to advance the German initiative together. The NATO-Ukraine Council is meeting in Brussels today on the subject of air defenses, and the first long-awaited positive signals come to us from the United States that the Republican members of Congress too want to continue their assistance for Ukraine. This is encouraging, and we have to continue in that direction. To us, the G7, it is obvious that humanity has to prevail. This is what Ukraine stands for in its fight against Putin's blind hatred. And this is what the brave people in Belarus stand for, who, despite the harsh repression, fight for democracy and freedom in Putin's proxy state. With its campaign of destruction against the democracy in Ukraine and the sovereignty of Ukraine, Putin also aims to call into question the ability of democracies to take action. We won't allow this to happen, neither in Europe nor in other parts of the world. We, the G7, seasoned crisis team, have been forced for more than 2 years to be the spearhead in supporting Ukraine. Defending the rules-based order has been on the agenda again here, as has been the case in the last 2 years. And therefore, Italy, rightly as before Italy, Japan has placed the defense of international law and the freedom of navigation in the Pacific at the top of the agenda. 2/3 of global growth is generated here, and it is there that the tension has become bitter reality for the riparian states of the South China Sea. For example, when Philippine supply vessels are being again pressurized by Chinese boats. It is there that North Korea, these days also with Russia's backing, is firing more test missiles into the sea than ever before. We, the G7, are taking a stand in the region. We're taking a stand for clear rules to govern the cooperation and interaction of states. Germany has made and continues to make a contribution towards this objective. We have posted and deployed our Navy and Air Force in the Indo-Pacific this year, and thus are underlining how important the rules-based order and the freedom of navigation is to us. We, the G7, are also in complete agreement on the fact that if China is pursuing an ever closer partnership in full sight, that leads to a near-legal war of aggression against Ukraine, we cannot just accept this. We call upon China to bring its influence to bear on Putin. We can, under no circumstances, accept that any country in the world feeds into Putin's war machinery. This is something we've made very clear, unmistakably clear, to China at this conference. It is very important that we have this close cooperation with regard to a country that is at the same time a partner, a competitor, and a systemic rival for the G7 countries. And we have reaffirmed our desire to place our economic relations on a broader basis, to further diversify our economic relations. Here, we can all learn from each other's experiences, from the different strategic responses we've found, especially from Japan. In international trade, too, rules apply, and everyone has to adhere to these rules. These rules, and we ourselves, are ever stronger the more we cooperate with those who see eye to eye with us on these matters, and there are quite a few of them to be found, especially smaller, medium-sized, and large states that believe in the reliability of a rules-based order and have thrived on this basis because it has ensured their coexistence and peace. As, for example, the states of Africa, which are direct European neighbors in the south, and I'm therefore grateful to Italy for having placed our relationship with Africa on our agenda this year. And this has been another central topic at our meeting with the chair of the African Union and with the African Union, Mauritania that is, and the African Union. We want to make headway with better networking and connecting Africa to Europe, for example, in the framework of the EU Global Gateway Initiative. This is in our very own interest. If we, as free democracies, we as the G7 do not engage, others will try to fill that very gap even more than they are already trying to do. Players and actors that despise our values and actively fight them. In our discussions with the African Union, things were brought to a point because they said you can either choose between non-democratic states or terrorists. And that is exactly the choice that we want to avoid to see. Reckless behavior, nefarious behavior only appear to be recipes for success. We, the G7, we, the strong economies, strong democracies, want to use our strength for a cooperation and interaction that is based on international law and fairness, on a just international order for each and everyone, because that is what unites our world. Thank you very much. Thank you. We now have time for 2 questions. Ms. Heide, Handelsblatt. Thank you, Madam Minister. Can you confirm that there has been an Israeli attack on targets in Iran? Has Germany or another G7 country been forewarned, and do you consider that to be an escalation? Do you expect a response on the part of Iran? I cannot but repeat what I said. Of course, we've been in continuous exchange, continuously liaising throughout the night, and we spoke out as the G7 today, as I said, against the backdrops of attacks on the 19th of April, we call upon all states to continue to engage in efforts that aim to avoid a further escalation, as we do the G7 relentlessly, and I've nothing to add to that. Mr. Dels, Bloomberg. Madam Minister, there seems to be a heated dispute between you and the Israeli Prime Minister. We've read reports about this today. Could you perhaps describe from your point of view what triggered that kind of dispute? Has there been a comparison with Nazis by the Prime Minister, and how do you view the fact that details were brought to the attention of the media from a confidential exchange of views? Have you talked about this today with the Israeli Prime Minister? We do not report from confidential meetings, and the German ambassador has made that very clear. The German ambassador has been in touch with the team of the Prime Minister and has been very clear with regard to what we think of such distorting reports. We've been told that the source has been unclear, and we have nothing to add to that. Thank you very much.
Sie hörten das Ensemble Banda Classica mit dem Bläseroktett Nummer 3 in B-Dur von Josef Myslivecek.
Si, si. Super, merci. Donc, du coup, il faut pas qu'il y ait... Lucien.
Ah pardon, excuse-moi. Ah merde. Bah, vous avez commencé le direct, je fais juste une image et je reviens. Ouais.
Les gars, maintenez les... pour laisser Bruno prendre la place. Je sais pas si je suis passé.
Le café, il y avait les petits qui étaient en train de montrer la terrasse.
Yes, I'm going up to the 16. I will change the format.
C'est sûr pour la remise en sécurisation pour votre bradeback.
me la prêter 2 minutes le temps qu'elle arrive? Ah mais attends, j'ai peut-être pas besoin en fait. Si j'ai peut-être besoin. Si j'ai peut-être besoin en fait. Je sais pas que j'ai mis du câble USB-C. Non? Ah bah... c'est la batterie derrière. C'est un peu de iPhone, non? Ah ouais. Oleg. Vas-y, va là, bref, fais-le là, il finit. C'est mieux.
Je sais pas.
Affirmatif, parce que bon, c'est juste un papier en médecin. Donc je peux faire une observation.
Oui.
Sortez par là. Vous sortez. Vous rentrez ou vous sortez.
Allez-y, passez Merci.
Normalement sur le secteur franchi.
Channel 1. 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 Channel 1.